Welcome to the Evergraze Making More from Sheep and Bestwoolbestlamb conference call on lamb survival. This is Paula, your operator speaking. Please be advised that today's call is being recorded. Now for opening remarks, I'd like to hand the call over to Kate Sargent. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Evergraze and Making More from Sheep phone seminar. We're covering the important topic today of improving the survival of lambs. My name's Kate Sargent. I'm from the Department of Primary Industries in Victoria, and I'm the project leader for Evergraze. I'll be chairing today's teleconference. We have online Dr. Jason Tromp from JT AgriSource and Dr. Ralph Berendt, who's a senior research scientist at the Department of Primary Industries in Hamilton. Ralph's also the Evergraze site leader at Hamilton. We also have Susan Robertson, scientist from Charles Sturt University and a member of the Wagga Evergraze site team. Jason will be giving us a big picture overview today of the industry implications on production and welfare and the key nutrition and management principles that can be applied to the improving the survival of lambs. Ralph and Susan will then talk more specifically about some of the recent Evergraze research findings demonstrating the impact of using shelter to increase lamb survival and what this means to farmers. Due to time constraints, we'll be holding questions until the end of the seminar, at which time you'll be prompted to press *1 on your phone to ask a question. So, Jason, I'll now hand over to you and we'll kick off.
Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, one and all. It's online. I'd like to talk to you today about the challenge of lamb survival and what I call turning reproductive potential into reality. The key messages that I'd like to touch on is the industry implications on both production and welfare, and you'd be interested to note in your Evergraze Exchange booklet that in the last 20 years national lamb survival rates have not improved and are costing the Australian sheep industry in excess of $100 million per annum. I'd also like to talk about the impact of the current lamb survival rates on the profitability of improving reproduction. It's having a significant impact on the viability of trying to improve marking rates whilst lamb survival rates are at the point that they are. And then I'll go on to talk to you about some of the key nutrition and management principles. So I'd like you to have a look at the slide that refers to have we a sustainable industry? And you can see in that 20 years ago our national sheep flock had in excess of 170 million sheep, of which there was about 80 million ewes in that count. Yet today we have barely 70 million sheep, of which there's only 40 million ewes in that count. So we've significantly eroded what I call the engine room of our business. But at the same time, we've been sustaining record lamb slaughter rates. And unfortunately, I can't tell you that is through improvements in reproductive efficiency. It's been through things such as an increased contribution of merino weather lambs to the lamb slaughter count. It's also been due to a shift in enterprise emphasis where 20 years ago we used to produce double the clean fleece weight of wool to carcass weight of lamb, and now that has tipped over and we produce nearly double the carcass weight of lamb to clean fleece weight of wool. So it's through those sort of shifts that we've driven the outcomes in the slide about a sustainable industry. If you have a look at the next slide on the national flock, the current situation is that we are marking on average about 77% lambs marked to ewes joined, all sheep types in. And you'd be interested to know that that figure hasn't changed in quite a long period of time. And I was just reading a report recently that interestingly said in 1977 the average marking rate in that year was 77%. And averaging the last two completed decades came up with the same figure. You'll also notice there that I've outlined the average scanning rates. These data comes from work that Kimball Curtis has done through national surveying. And you'll see that 120% is the average scanning rate, yet we're only marking an average of 77% of lambs. What is interesting is that from that average result there, you can see that half of the lambs born in the average flock are born as twins. 60% of them are singles, which is 60 fetuses, 30% of twins, which is another 60 fetuses. So in the average flock, half of the lambs born each year are born as twins, which is where the key challenge around lamb survival lies. If you follow on to the next slide around the total turn-off of sheep, mutton and live export each year compared to lambs marked, you'll notice for the first 17 or 18 years in that graph, we've had very consistent turn-off rates nationally. But you'll notice that it's plummeted in the last couple of years. This is a symptom of our current reproduction rates. Basically, the national flock has gone into a rebuilding phase, and the national flock at its current marking rate can only rebuild by selling less, because at 77% lambs marked to use joined, it's barely self-replacing. So one of the key messages we're putting to the industry and to producers, if you can increase your marking rates by just 5 to 10%, suddenly you can do both. You can work on sustaining your turn-off rates, which is good for your own cash flow, good for the sustainability of our processing industry, but at the same time start to rebuild your ewe-base, being the engine room of your business. The next 3 slides in a row are a key point that I'd like to get across in this presentation. The first one is around increasing conception rates. I find that producers see this often as the first avenue to improving reproduction rates, but quite often it's a misguided approach to improve conception in the beginning. If you look at the average conception rates totaling to 120% scanning, which is the same data I presented previously, if you look at the average survival of single-born lambs of 80% and twin-born lambs of 50%, that's how you suddenly deliver this national average marking rate of 77 or 78%. When producers go to increase conception rates, as shown there, you move towards a scanning percentage that suddenly has almost 4 times the number of lambs born as twins, being 120 in that table, compared to 35 single-born lambs. At the existing survival rates, that means, in summary for that table, we've increased scanning by 35%, or 35 per 100 ewes, but only marked 10% extra lambs, going from 78 to 88. It actually means the survival of those extra fetuses is barely 30%, because you've pushed lambs from a single category into a twin category with that higher scanning rate, and it's a very inefficient way to improve reproduction rates. If you turn to the next slide, which looks at the avenue of improving survival as the way to increase reproduction rates, you can see that scanning rates in both sides of that table have stayed the same, yet we've successfully been able to increase marking rates by almost 20%, 18% in that example. This has been achieved by increasing single lamb survival rates from 80% up to 90%, which is well within the scope of industry best practice, and increasing twin lamb survival from 50% to 70%, which is again well within the scope of industry best practice. To devote extra resources to ewe nutrition in late pregnancy to improve, in mid to late pregnancy to improve lamb survival is a much more efficient way to improve reproduction in most flocks than is devoting extra energy and resources to conception. You'll see that the last slide in that sequence is where the gold lies. It's where you have both higher conception rates and higher lamb survival. So from the improved scanning rate of 155%, with better lamb survivals, it's possible to mark in excess of 115% of lambs. Interestingly, today in our national flock, we regularly see merino sheep scanning in excess of 150%, yet achieving lamb marking rates consistently under 100%. Quite often, the merino sheep gets a bad rap for being having a lack of fertility. The message I'm clearly giving you today, that is most often always because of how we manage that sheep, not because of her genetic limitations. The next point I'd like to make is a key point about the impact of current lamb survival rates on the profitability of improving reproduction. What we see is, and I've already told you this, that the average survival rate of twin-born lambs, particularly merino to merino twins, is around 50%. And I'll talk to you in a minute around the reasons why. Given that that's the average survival rate, what we often hear from benchmarking reports is that improving reproduction rate doesn't actually improve whole farm profit. And this slide goes some way to explaining that. Basically, what this shows is as scanning rates increase at a 50% lamb survival rate, which is industry standard, there is only a marginal increase in whole farm profit. It's not until you increase twin lamb survival, in particular, and those survival figures are for twins, 50, 65 and 80%, again 80% being within the scope of industry best practice. It's not until you're